And I finally had one YouTube video take off. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't planned. I literally just filmed a day in my life, titled it A Day in the Life of an Infantry Platoon Leader, thinking nothing of it. And this was timed up so perfectly because I made the video live and then we went to gunnery for 30 days out in the field. So I had limited access to my phone. And I remember we're at gunnery a few days after I launched this video, got access to my phone, refreshed it. And I saw this video had like 100,000 views, which was unheard of for any video on my channel. A few days later, 400,000 views. This video went to 1 million views within the first 30 days, I believe. And my YouTube subscribers went from 30,000 to 80,000. And that became a catalyst to this next chapter of me transitioning back from South Korea to the States, transitioning out of the Army, signing a lease for our first warehouse, and that following year, 2017, doing our first 7 figures in revenue.
You're listening to the Born Primitive podcast. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Born Primitive podcast. How we doing, Tony?
Morning, Bear.
The newly appointed COO. How we feeling?
Good.
It's got good ring to it.
Yeah. I like it.
All right.
Feels good.
Well, don't get cocky on me now. Still expect you to be taking that trash out in the kitchen.
Always.
All right. Well, hey, today's guest we're really excited about. And Tony and I were just talking. This individual, I think there's a lot of similarities with his entrepreneurial journey as well as the business he has built. So without further ado, I want to just introduce Nick Bear. Nick is an entrepreneur, hybrid athlete, U.S. Army veteran, and founder CEO of Bear Performance Nutrition, known as BPN. What started as a side project during his time as an Army infantry officer has grown into a multi-million-dollar brand. Dedicated endurance athlete, Nick is on a mission to push his physical and mental limits, currently training to run a sub-230 marathon at Grandma's Marathon in June of this year. He's also the creator of the Hybrid Athlete Training app and host of the Nick Bear podcast. His new book, Go One More, embodies his philosophy of perseverance, grit, and purpose. So check it out at nickbear.com and make sure you check him out on Instagram at Nick Bear Fitness. But Nick, hell of a run so far, man. Appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Gentlemen, I appreciate it. And Tony, like I said before we started recording, congratulations on the promotion. That's big. It's huge. So congrats and thanks, guys.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Nick, because now Tony is technically president and COO. So does that mean, is he higher in the chain of command and me as the CEO? I don't know.
No, sir. No, sir.
Why don't I have president in front of my name? Do I need to be the chairman and CEO?
Chairman of the board.
That hits. Yeah, the board that we don't have.
Yeah.
Well, I got a guy on my team. His name's Josh Holly, and he's CFO, COO. And I mean, we always say he runs the business. You know, he's in the nuts of the bolts. I love the brand side of the business. I love guiding the vision of where we're heading, what we're working on. But Josh is the one daily working on the things that I fortunately don't want to or have to work on.
Well, that sounds also very similar. I think we have a similar dynamic over here. But Nick, as I told you before we went on air, like I'd love to focus this conversation around your entrepreneurial journey because there's a lot of parallels to Born Primitive based on what I can see on paper, especially, you know, ironically, you being an Army officer, me being a Navy officer and you know, kind of running these things on the side. So I'd love if you could just give us a quick background on how it all got started in the early days, and what kind of prompted you to, you know, say, screw it, let's make a run at this and see what we can do.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I grew up in central Pennsylvania, small town right outside of Hershey, and ended up going to college at the Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP, which is right next to Pittsburgh. Are you guys familiar?
I'm from Somerset County, which is about 40 minutes from IUP. Southwest,
cool.
Flight 93, that one that landed in the middle of nowhere. That's right where I'm from. So,
oh wow,
yeah, IUP was my senior year of high school. We would make the journey every once one weekend out of the month.
And hold on, I got to stop you. You know you're in the country when you call out where you're from by the county name, not the town name.
Yeah.
Did you all just catch that?
Oh, yeah.
You just called out the county. Like if I said I'm from Porter County, Indiana, you'd be like, man, that's freaking country.
When I have to say Pittsburgh usually, which is 2 hours from where I'm from.
So get out of here. Yeah. All right, sorry, I don't mean to derail us, but I caught that.
Yeah. You're from Pennsylvania originally?
Yeah, Southwest. It's 40 minutes from IUP.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you know, the first 23 years of my life were spent in Pennsylvania. And when I was in high school, I was watching my cousin, Matt. This was 2006, 2007. He enlisted in the Army. He was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, 101st. And I was watching him go on deployments, come back, go on deployments, come back, Iraq, Afghanistan. And I saw him transform when I was in high school from this boy to this man. And I said, I want that for myself. I want to experience that. So I initially wanted to enlist when I was in high school. And my mom pushed back on that really, really hard. So we came to an agreement that I'd go to college first and then join the military. So I applied for, when I was in high school, the Army ROTC scholarship, which now it's pretty competitive from what I understand. Back then, I mean, it was this hidden gem that really no one knew about or talked about. So I applied for it. I got it, which then ended up going to IUP. The Army paid for my tuition, room and board, books. It was a great deal. And I just had to do my military contract post college to make sure all that was paid for. And at the time in my life, this is 2009 that I started going to college at IUP. I was obsessed with the bodybuilding space, strength training, bodybuilding, and the fitness industry back then, as I'm sure you guys are aware of, was much different and felt and looked a lot different than it is today. That's when like the Arnold Expo was massive. I was going to the Arnold Expo every year in Ohio. And I was making my own supplements in my dorm room in my college. So I'd buy all these ingredients in bulk and then I'd mix it up in my dorm room. So I'd be buying creatine, caffeine, beta-alanine, citrulline malate. And if you walked into my dorm room or my college apartment, early college days, it looked like I was a drug dealer because I got this food scale. I have white powder everywhere. And then people were coming to my dorm room, handing me a few bucks. I'm handing them this baggie of white powder, which was my homemade pre-workout at the time. And I wasn't really making much money off it, but I just loved it. I loved the space. I loved the industry. I was studying nutrition in college, knew I was going to join the military afterwards. And it was between my junior and senior year of school that when you're in ROTC, you have to go to what is called LDAC, Leadership Development Assessment Course. And at the time, this was in Fort Lewis, Washington. They assess you based off of all the other cadets in the nation. And that assessment determines what job you do in the military, the Army specifically, if you go active, reserve, National Guard. It determines how competitive you are against your peers based off of what you want to do in your career path in the Army. And I assessed very well there. And that was the first time in my life that I was, I guess, given like the title or granted being called exceptional. So there was like an exceptional title there. It was called an E. You get an E at camp. And getting that E just provided me this level of confidence that I never had in my life before. Because up until that point, I just felt like I blended in. I was average, playing high school or playing sports in high school growing up. I was never the stud athlete. I was on the varsity teams, but I was never first to be picked. I always saw myself as average, and that's all I was ever going to do. And I was okay with that. I accepted that. But there was something that happened between my junior and senior year of school, getting that E at LDAC. They just unlocked this new level of confidence. So I came back from Fort Lewis in Washington that summer. And at that time, the Military Associated Bank, USAA, was offering loans to cadets. They were called pre-commissioning loans because they knew that as soon as we graduated and went to school, we were going to have a full-time job in the military, secure paycheck. So all my friends were taking out this loan, which was up to $25,000, and they were buying new cars, engagement rings, going on vacations. And I saw this as my golden ticket to finally start this business that I've been tinkering on for the years prior. So I applied for the loan with USAA. I got approved for $20,000. I had this new level of confidence after being given this E title at LDAC. And from there, everything just fell into place where I formed an LLC for Bear Performance Nutrition. I found a manufacturer. At the time, they were based out of California. I spent all the money on that inventory. I shipped it to my apartment in Western Pennsylvania at IUP. I had 12-week lead times. I had no money left over, so I had a friend design our logo for free. I had another friend design our website for free. And I told my dad that I was going to make $1 million that first year because I had it calculated where I was going to send a few bottles to a few of these fitness YouTubers, and fitness YouTube at the time was brand new. So I thought if I sent a few bottles to a few of these YouTubers and they did a review, that then if 2% of their audience converted, I'd make $1 million. Like it all just seemed so easy. And my dad said, Nick, if it was that easy, everyone would do it. And there's a reason now that those words are plastered on the wall outside of our gym, is because I had to learn the hard lesson that first year we did $20,000 in revenue. Year 2, we did $20,000 in revenue. Year 3, we did $20,000 in revenue. So the $1 million didn't come until 2017. 2017 is when we finally crossed the 7-figure mark. And from there, it all didn't work out the way that I thought it would from the start. A year after starting the business, I graduated college, degree in nutrition. I get shipped to Fort Benning, Georgia, where I'm at Fort Benning in and out of schools for a year between infantry school, Ranger school, airborne school, Bradley leader course. After being in Georgia for a year, I get stationed in Fort Hood, Texas. And that's 2014. And that's when I actually started picking up the camera and documenting my life. Because I realized when I got to Texas, I have all of this supply. I have zero demand. I have a loan payment that's going to start soon. Because USA set it up very nice for these cadets where we didn't have to make our first payment for 18 months after getting the money. Super low interest rate. But when I got to Texas, I realized I got to start making some money. I got to pay this back. So I picked up a camera and I started documenting my life. And that changed everything. So those first 2 years were brutal. They were tough. It didn't work out the way I thought it would. And then when I finally got to Texas, picking up the camera changed everything.
Well, it's an interesting, a few nuggets to pull out of there is, and we might have even talked about this on the last episode about, your threshold for risk, because Nick, you probably get a lot of guys and girls that come to you for entrepreneurial advice now. And I do. And there's a couple times that I speak at this thing a couple times a year. And we always talk about just like, hey, do I raise capital? Do I go get a loan? Do I do this? And we talk about kind of your willingness to take risk and where that lands in different phases of your life. And I love the fact that your immediate reaction was to take out a loan and not, go, get some relative to give you 20 grand, but they buy 51% of the business like before it even starts. So great advice there. And for anyone listening, like heed that because, we've said before, if you're 45 with 4 kids and you just got out of the military, like maybe that's not a time to double down and put a lien on the house for a $200,000 bet on something that you haven't tested. But for you as a young buck that's about to be a commissioned officer in the Army, you're going to get a steady paycheck, and which is why USAA does that, which is brilliant by them because you think you're probably getting a sweet deal and they know, all right, well, we're just going to garnish this kid's wages with the government if he doesn't pay us. So it's like a guarantee. So love the angle from USAA, like getting these college kids to be like, wait, I can get 25 grand. Like, but I love that you took that bet. And I also, the second theme I want to call out is this instant gratification that people kind of associate with being an entrepreneur. We were Tony and I were talking about this in the last episode. I didn't take a paycheck until I think December of 2017, and I have emails going back to January of 2012, and I joined the Navy in June of 2014. So almost 6 years where I didn't take a paycheck, and then our co-founder Mallory, she didn't take a paycheck till July of 2017. So 5.5 years. of no, you're pulling nothing out of the business. So the fact that you hit 20K, 20K, and I'm sure you were trying all kinds of different tactics, but it sounds like what unlocked it was the content. Now, was this more you at the gym, and that gave you a platform to start promoting the supplements, or was it just you, just day-to-day life? And I guess, how did being a content creator open that up? And what did you see immediately?
Yeah. To go back a second, did you start the business in 2012?
A lot of people actually might not know this, but the original Born Primitive was actually Snatch Shorts LLC. And that, I believe, I'd have to go back, was incorporated in 2013. But I had snatchshorts.com, domain name that I bought on like GoDaddy or whatever. So I had bear@snatchshorts.com, which was my original email. And I was digging through the archives and I found emails from like going back to January 2012 when I was talking with suppliers for the first time, trying to figure out how we're going to make these compression shorts for weightlifters. But yes, I went to OCS in June of 2014, and I believe we incorporated Born Primitive in March of 2014.
Okay. Yeah.
That's our timeline.
Yeah, I started the business in 2012, and similar to you, I didn't take my first paycheck or money out of the business until 2017.
Yeah, same, man. That's crazy. And even your high school story, like I wanted to enlist in the Navy out of high school. My parents were like, "Hey, go get your college degree, and then you can do it later." So yeah. There's like some wild parallels. But I made the mistake, and we can joke about it now, and I talk about this, is that rather than going and get a loan like you did, which I calculated we needed $12,000 to get things started. That I think our first PO was 200 units of Snatch Shorts. Those honestly were probably $15 a unit. So that's like $3,000 right there. And then we needed to build a shitty little website, and some money for other things. And $12,000 was what I calculated we needed. So I got $10,000 from my brother. He wouldn't give me the other $2,000 because he wanted me to have skin in the game. So I needed to put $2,000 in. And I think at the time I had like $3,400 in my checking account. So, but I gave up 31% of the business for that. Because at the time it didn't exist. Right. And I'm like, yeah, what's it matter? Sure. You know what I mean? And that was our football number in college, which is how scientific that equity calculation was, which is a little ridiculous in hindsight when you think of it.
Good multiple.
Oh my God. Yeah. He's done okay. So yeah, I just think for entrepreneurs that are starting out, these are great kind of conversations and things to think about. Because you got to be careful, one, who you do business with, but also that where you land on that risk continuum and your willingness to take risk. And so I love the fact that you went and got a loan with Uncle Sam and didn't give a family member an equity number based on your football number that you wore in college like I did.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say it was like intentional or even strategic. It's just I didn't know what I didn't know. And my dad's side of the family were all dairy farmers growing up. So my grandfather always just told us, the only money you have is the money that's in your account. So I didn't know about raising capital or financing inventory for years down the road. So it was really like, a lot of people compliment me for not giving up equity early on, but it wasn't really a thought because I didn't know that was even an option. So I'm glad that I didn't know it was an option, because I can't tell you where I'd be right now if I knew.
Well, it's interesting, Nick, because there are founders like us that were more savvy on that whole world when they launched their business. And that was the plan the entire time. It's like, all right, we're going to raise capital, we're going to get a trajectory, and then in 3 years, we're going to do it again, and we're going to do it again. And by the end of it, I'm only going to own 6%, but I will have convinced 3 different PE firms over a 12-year horizon to just give me the next bite at the apple. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're the same way. I didn't know any better either. And I'm sure... And eventually I'd love to get into this as far as whether you've raised capital and how that transpired. But there's some brands we've competed against that have raised over 100 million in capital. And we're in the same space and we're toe to toe with them because they were raising capital in 2020, 2021 when it was just crazy, where the multiples were insane and people were getting revenue multiples and they're still losing $10 million a year. It was just wild. So the fact that, we've been a little scrappy, and I'm sure you were, especially in the early days when you're having your buddy design your logo. Another similarity, we had our logo done as a favor as well. We did not pay for it, which I remember a few years ago, I was like, should we get that in writing so we don't get something in the mail? Like, hey, you owe us like $5 million we have your logo as on ransom. But okay. So you started doing the content, and
Yep.
then what transpired from there? And obviously you're active duty as well, and so you're trying to do this at odd hours, early mornings when obviously when you're in Ranger school, you're not checking email, things like that. So I'd love to hear more about how you balanced it as well.
I started the content when I got to Texas, because obviously when I was in Georgia, there was just no time to create content. I mean, Ranger School, for example, was a 61-day course. I was there for 145 days because I failed 2 phases. So I was in and out of the field for that entire year when I was in Georgia. When I got to Texas, at the time, the unit that I was assigned to was in Germany they had like 3 months left on their rotation. So I got stationed at Fort Hood, and pretty much my schedule for 3 months was go check in, accountability formation. If there was nothing to do, they'd send me home because I was just waiting for my unit to get back. So I had $500 left to my name at this point, and I decided I was going to finally start this YouTube channel to go all in and build the brand. And at this point, I actually tried starting a YouTube channel on 2 separate occasions. And I would record a video, post it online. It would get criticism and hate. So I would delete the video, delete the channel, and quit on YouTube. I did that twice. The third time was when I got to Texas, units in Germany at the time. And I realized that if I didn't do something to turn this company around, it was going to die off. There was one more chance for me to take. So I had $500 left, spent that $500. I bought a Canon T3i camera, a 50 millimeter lens. I remember it didn't have autofocus. So like whenever I would film, I'd have to go set the focus on an object in the foreground, press record, go stand in front of the camera where that object was and record. And my content strategy at the time was just record everything. I would take it into the gym, record my workouts. I'd film what I was eating. I would film behind the scenes of the business. I would film videos when I finally got a platoon and started training, just talking about my military experience and what I was learning as a new officer. And I just filmed and created whatever I had availability to. And I fell in love with the process. I fell in love with documenting, with filming, with editing. And for those first couple of years, like when I was in the military, my responsibilities were low. You know, earlier you made the comment of having a risk profile based off of the season and chapter of life you're in. You know, back then, 2014, I was 24 years old. I wasn't in a relationship, no kids, limited responsibility. My only 2 responsibilities were my job in the military and building my business. Now, married, business, 2 young kids. I mean, my ability to take bigger risks now looks a whole lot different than it did then. There's a lot more to lose. But back then I had nothing to lose. I had all to gain. And the channel slowly started picking up traction. I mean, slowly. I was doing full day of eating videos, showing workouts, talking about the military. This is 2014, 2015, 2016. And for 3 years, literally 3 years, it was wake up early, start recording a video, and then drive into work to be at PT by 6 a.m., do PT, eat breakfast, spend the whole day at work. If we were in garrison, if we were in the field, obviously, you know, I was gone for a few days, a few weeks at a time. But we were in garrison. I leave work for the day, 5 p.m. I'd go straight to the gym with my camera. I'd film a workout at the gym. I'd come home, make a meal, film the meal, edit the video until 10, 11, 12 p.m., and then sleep for a few hours and do the same thing over again. And on the weekends, I would look forward to the weekends because all I'd have to do was film a video and build a business. So I'd wake up early. I'd go into Austin. I would document my training, different restaurants. I was collaborating with other fitness YouTubers in the Central Texas space. And there was this slow growth of YouTube. And as the slow growth of YouTube occurred for me, sales slowly started to climb, like very, very slowly. And the way that my business was set up then was I left all of my inventory in Pennsylvania at my parents' house. So there was this room above the garage in my parents' house where we had our shipping station set up and our few boxes of inventory. And my dad and my brother would ship orders back from Pennsylvania. And I mean, at the time, it was a couple orders every couple days. So they would pack an order, and then we didn't even, like, there wasn't enough volume to even have to go to the post office to drop them off. When the mailman would come around for the day, he would just pick up like 1 or 2 boxes and take them back and ship them out for us. So all operations, if you will, were being done back in Pennsylvania, and I was building the business down in Texas. And then in 2016, we ended up going to my unit, South Korea, for a 9-month rotation. And when we got to Korea, I didn't think I was going to be able to film or document anything. I didn't know what to expect going over to Korea for a 9-month rotation. But what I realized when I got there was that we were pretty much doing our same job as we were in Texas. However, this time I lived right next to my company headquarters. In Texas, I had a 30 to 40 minute drive to and from work every day. Now I'm living right next to company headquarters. The gym was really close. You know, typically if we weren't at gunnery or training, I was back in my barracks room by 5 p.m. every night. So I saw this as my opportunity to double down and go all in and building the business. And I knew that shortly after transitioning back to the States, I would be transitioning out of the military. My contract was up. So this is my moment to either make it or break it. And at that time, the business was doing $2,000 a month in revenue. My goal was that we would do $10,000 a month in revenue after the 9-month rotation. And within 90 days, we were doing $10,000 a month in revenue with the business. And I made a pact to myself that entire rotation in Korea, I wasn't going to watch any movies, no TV, no video games, no socializing. Every waking moment outside of my job as a platoon leader was going to be spent building the business. I formulated and developed new products when I was in Korea, relaunched the website on Shopify when we were in Korea. I mean, before that, we were just operating off of my friend's web hosting platform, and it linked to a PayPal checkout. So built the website on Shopify in Korea. I did a rebrand when I was in Korea in those first 90 days. I was writing handwritten thank you notes to everyone who placed an order in my barracks room at night. I put it in the mailbox the next morning, shipped those back to the States. And then I finally had one YouTube video take off. And it wasn't strategic. It wasn't planned. I literally just filmed a day in my life. And I wanted to make this video live. And I was like, what do I title this video? I thought about it for a second. I titled it A Day in the Life of an Infantry Platoon Leader, thinking nothing of it. And this was timed up so perfectly because after I launched this video, and I've launched at this point hundreds of videos leading up to this moment, I made the video live, and then we went to gunnery for 30 days out in the field. So I had limited access to my phone, no access to my computer. And I remember we're at gunnery a few days after I launched this video and got access to my phone, refreshed it. And I saw this video had like 100,000 views, which was unheard of for any video on my channel. A few days later, refresh, 400,000 views. A few days later, refresh, 800,000 views. This video went to 1 million views within the first 30 days, I believe. And my YouTube subscribers went from 30,000 to 80,000. And this felt like I was just like, I hit the lottery. You know, it didn't immediately affect the business growth or sales. We saw more traffic to the website, but nothing really overnight. But this one video provided me just the confidence to keep going. Because up until that point, I'm making videos 2-3 years consistently, 3-4 videos uploaded on YouTube a week with this slow growth, very, very slow growth, but I never experienced something like this. And that became a catalyst to this next chapter of me transitioning back from South Korea to the States, transitioning out of the Army, signing a lease for our first warehouse, my brother moving down from Pennsylvania to Texas, joining me in the journey. And that following year, 2017, doing our first 7 figures in revenue.
Well, first off, man, like congrats. Like that's so impressive. And I hope by you saying what you said, people realize like the tenacity it takes to be in the 0.1%. I mean, the discipline you had, no TV, no movies. I'm going all in on this, getting up early, editing late into the evening. I can relate to that. And it's also ironic. I also experienced the same thing on my deployments in a way was my most productive times because the little life stuff is taken care of. You know, you got a chow hall right there, right? So you go in there, you can eat in 20 minutes and be out. You know what I mean? Like everything's planned, your commute, we said it was next door. So there's an hour you got back each day. The gym's right there, everything's simplified. So you have all this extra dead time and what do you do with it? And I'm sure the guys in your platoon were probably fucking around playing video games. That you have the movies that, you know, someone has a bootlegged, you know, hard drive that has every movie on planet Earth on it that, you know, they watch a million movies, they rewatch Game of Thrones. Like that's pretty standard deployment behavior. And you were instead, you know, getting in the trenches and building your business. And I can relate to that. Cause I remember my CENTCOM deployment, you know, we were like, I think 9 hours ahead. And my kind of battle rhythm was at like 8:30 PM. We had to brief Tampa SOC sent usually around 7 or 8 PM. And once that was done, I was basically done for the night. So at about 9 PM, I'd fire up the espresso machine in my hotel room and hammer a couple espressos. And then, you know, my call schedule was usually between 9 PM and like 2 AM. Like Tony, I think our CTC calls, that was like my last call. It was like a 1 AM call my time because they were on Pacific time, right? But that's when I got all my work done, right? But I knew guys were back in their rooms watching, you know, movies and video games. And I never resented that. I feel like it gave me a little bit of an edge knowing like, okay, you know, I could just be, you know, doing what everyone else is doing. And instead, like my day's just starting and everyone else's is done. You know what I mean? So I can relate to a lot of what you said. And I just think it really encapsulates like what it takes to be successful. And even when you're that, you know, when you bring that level of tenacity and that level of discipline, it doesn't guarantee success, right? Like just because you're like that doesn't mean it like get popped off. So that's almost what makes being an entrepreneur even scarier, because you could be the scrappiest, hardest working guy, but if you just don't have the right angle or your product isn't unique enough, like it doesn't matter how much you put behind it, it's just never going to catch. But I'm so glad you started getting traction. It kind of sounds like maybe it was almost on life support, and this like put jet fuel into it, and then you realize, wow, this is actually a real business. So mad props for the way you did it, man. I got a lot of respect for that.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I like to quote Tim Grover often in this kind of context, and in his book Winning, he talks about this concept of like building confidence. And to build confidence, oftentimes, not always, but you need that first win. And that first win is very subjective and relative to the individual. And you achieve that first win by putting in just an excessive amount of work. And you get that win and it builds this confidence. And then from there, you go after a bigger win. But with that bigger win, you have to put in more effort, more work. And through that process, you might succeed, you might fail. But when you finally do win, and you achieve that next level up, you build more and more confidence. So if I look back at these last 13 years, I've built all of this confidence by going after bigger wins. And I've had a lot of failures. I mean, I've had so much failure in these last 13 years, small failures and really, really big ones. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've just gained all this confidence in 13 years, which you can say is wisdom through experience of just going after bigger wins every time.
And what are some of those? And I actually am prepping for this. I heard you talk through kind of your, and I don't know the exact time period of when you stepped down as the CEO for a little bit. And then you go into talk, and it's actually relative to even kind of Bear and I's role here. You talk about being a visionary versus an integrator. Walk us through, obviously you're talking through building the confidence over 13 years, and then you touched on you've made many failures as well. Why was that? And of course, feel free to give a quick summary for those who don't know that story. Why do you view that as one of your bigger failures, kind of taking a step back? Because you can hear that as what, like some CEOs that or founders, that can be the biggest kind of trajectory benefit in their careers, that they do take a step back. But then in your case, that wasn't the answer. So what happened with that scenario, and how did that change your involvement with the company?
Yeah, I made mistakes during that time frame, but it's hard for me now to say that it was a failure because I learned so much in that process that it elevated me to a new level of entrepreneur that I wouldn't have achieved without that decision. So in January of 2023, I stepped down from the CEO role of the business. And it was for a few reasons. One, I was navigating this new chapter of life that I was having trouble navigating. And that new chapter of life was being a dad. You know, my daughter was born. Now I have 2 kids, but my daughter was born, and I was trying to balance being a content creator, being the founder and CEO of this business that was growing, and then being the dad that I wanted to be. And at that time, I didn't think I could be professionally ambitious and then content in my home family life at the same time. I just didn't think I could balance those two. And then simultaneously at that time, I didn't think that I had the ability to take the business to the next level. And it wasn't because of any mistakes that I made, but it was the influence from the outside world showing me what CEOs looked like. And I said, that's not me. I'm a brand guy. Like, I'm a brand builder. I'm not a businessman. And I'm a big fan of the podcast Founders. And I can't remember exactly what episode this was. It might have been the Dyson episode. And he was describing himself as the anti-business billionaire. And I'm by no means a billionaire, but that guy resonated with that. I was like, I relate to that because I love building brand, but I don't consider myself a business person necessarily. So this chapter of my life, I just thought, I'm not the business person this business needs to take it to the next level. That was my biggest mistake, because what I neglected there was how important vision is. And it's really hard to replace the vision of a founder. The person who starts the thing, is so passionate about the thing, loves the thing, wants to see it grow, has the vision for it. And I stepped down for those reasons and went into what I called a brand amplification area of the business, just focusing on content and driving traffic to the business, the brand. And it's crazy how quickly things fall apart and fall off trajectory when the visionary moves out of a role in the business. Now, I believe the best brands in the world can continue operating without a founder as long as that vision is maintained. One of my favorite books, I'm going to go on a side note right now, but one of my favorite books I read in this last year is Beyond Entrepreneurship 2.0, BE 2.0 by Jim Collins. And they talk about in that book that the components of vision, a strong vision, are core values, purpose, and goals. And those core values and that purpose shouldn't change more than once every 100 years. And goals should be set at 10 to 25-year targets. And even after a visionary is gone, whether he leaves the business, he or she leaves the business, or they pass on, they die, if that vision is still maintained in the business and leaders and subordinates in that business understand how valuable that vision is, the business can keep growing because it maintains the vision, and the strategy and tactics that are put in place are built off of the vision, those core values, that purpose, and those goals. In January of 2023, I did not clearly define our vision. It wasn't written down. It wasn't communicated. It was up here in my head, and I talked about it a lot, but I didn't clearly define it for the team to execute upon. So when I stepped back, everyone's interpretation of the vision was a little bit different, and they created strategies and tactics based off of the vision they had in their head, not in mine. And brand fell off track. We started pursuing paths that weren't authentic and original to us. We started falling into the camp of just being another CPG brand for everyone. We lost our edge. We lost our niche. And I was gone for a year. And when I decided to come back and put myself back in the CEO role, it was reinstilling that vision and making it very clearly defined and making sure the team understood it. And I came back and made a lot of changes. And I talked to my CFO, COO at the time, Josh Hawley. And I said, Josh, like, we just gotta get this brand back on track. I don't want to look at any finances. I don't want to see any P&L. I don't want to know what the balance sheet looks like. Just tell me if we're headed in a dangerous direction. And until you tell me otherwise, I'm just going to keep building this brand, get things back on track. And within 90 days, everything was back on track. Brand was back on track, partnerships, content, paid strategy, and financials. Not just revenue, but profitability. And through that experience, one, I gained my confidence back that I am the person who needs to be in this role, building and leading this business. Vision is so important, and vision being clearly defined and communicated to a team. And then the way you build is by focus and doing more with less. And we looked at what we were doing when I came back, and it was this whiteboard of all these projects and initiatives and ideas. And we trimmed it and we removed probably 90% of it. We hyper-focused and we went all in, and we got the brand back on track very quickly. But I needed that experience to rebuild my confidence, realize I was the person to take this business to the next level, and that you don't have to be a business person with an MBA, 20 years of experience and gray hair to build a brand.
Yeah, it's so good, man. There's definitely not some textbook picture of what a CEO should look like or how they conduct themselves, and you're living proof of that. And it sounds like maybe you had a little bit of imposter syndrome of thinking like, oh, I'm not that seasoned CEO, but it's like, to play devil's advocate is like, you were precisely that. I mean, you built it from nothing, and your ability to navigate those early years validates why you're in that seat in the first place, right? That's why I get a laugh. There's some, founders that I know that have gotten big private equity investments, and typically what ends up happening is you meet with the big partners, they come in, you make a deal, and then you don't ever talk to the partner again who kind of wooed you on the deal. You get handed to some manager who has an MBA from Harvard, and now you have some 27-year-old telling you that how to run your business. And there's been multiple, buddies that I've talked to that fell into this camp. It's like, I started this damn thing, and now I got a guy who's never built a goddamn thing in his life telling me that because we missed the target by 2% this month, that we have to like change all this shit and build a PowerPoint to tell him how we're going to do it. Right. So, I think, I don't know where I was going with that. I lost my train of thought.
Nick, how do you talked about having the vision in your head, but maybe not doing the best job of kind of defining that. What is the mechanism you use now as the active CEO to make sure that the vision that you have for the brand is clearly defined for the team to execute upon?
I mean, I literally wrote down our core values, and it wasn't core values like you would think of just like these words that you pull off of a website of what are our core values. We used to say our core values were integrity, transparency, and service, which they are, but that didn't provide the team enough of meat to go execute upon. I mean, you could apply that to many other businesses. They weren't unique to us. Like one of our core values now is like, we will not pursue growth at the expense of profitability. Our core values are very clearly defined. We've written them down, and everyone on the team has those core values, and we go over them very frequently, just to reinforce like, these are what our core values are. Then our purpose, clearly defined, wrote down what is our purpose. This is what we're working towards. And then our goals, we have about 6 goals that are 10-year targets. Everyone on the team has a copy and knows what our goals are that we're working towards. So now when they go and create strategy and tactics for their job, their department, they're making sure that those strategies and tactics align with our core values, our purpose, and our goals. And if they don't pursue it. But it allows us to be more consistent, and it allows the yes or no to be so clearly and quickly answered because it has to align with those 3 things.
And do you operate, would you describe the way in which BPN operates as pretty decentralized, or is it a hybrid of kind of centralized, decentralized? Where have you, and has that changed over time?
It's definitely a hybrid. It definitely is centralized when we are talking like the really important big picture stuff. But from there, as long as that is held true and people understand like how valuable certain things are to me in the leadership team, from there it's decentralized where our departments can go operate on their own with very limited need for approval or disapproval. Just go execute. And as long as you're focused on that vision, you can operate in a decentralized manner.
There's a lot more to cover on your entrepreneurial journey.
We're going to have to do a part 2.
We might have to, yeah. But I guess I'm more curious, like kind of looking under the hood. Sounds like you started achieving success. Have you raised capital since then? You know, we've talked about this. If I could go back and do it again, would I have raised capital, created some liquidity for the family? You know, particularly if you could have done it in 2020, 2021, when PE firms were just throwing money at everyone and giving ridiculous multiples. So I'm curious, have you gone down that road, how it went, or have you just retained, you know, all of your ownership, and just kind of your take on that?
In 2022, we did a seed round investment, and we didn't need the capital at the time, but my goal was to bring on some strategic advisors. So I gave up 10% equity to bring on some strategic advisors who came into the business and have been greatly beneficial. Definitely a vast difference in experience within those investors that we brought on. But I gave up 10%, some money went to the balance sheet, and we got some strategic help to help us, you know, get to the next level. Other than that, we did create an EIP program. I guess it was like a year and a half ago now, employee incentive program. So people at the time that were in the business got stock options in the brand, in the business, because one of the things I used to always say to the team was like, I want you to act like owners. I want you to act like you're an owner of this business. And it was really hard for me to continue saying that without making them owners, providing them stock options. So then I carved out a pool of equity for the employees in the business at that time. And those are only 2 kind of packages that we've created and distributed over the lifetime of this business. And
have you thought about that in the future, to try to take some chips off the table for you personally to go the PE route?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we've explored. We launched a process about 2 years ago, and we explored that with some private equity groups. Didn't end up doing a deal in the way that it was structured and just the way that the deal was going to be set up. It's something that we're, you know, always exploring and interested in, but we operate the business to be profitable. You know, this year we'll do about 80 million in revenue, and we operate the business to be mid to high teens EBITDA. We have no debt on the business. We haven't touched a line of credit. So the brand's healthy and growing. So we're always opportunistic, but kind of like you talked about earlier, I mean, I have so many friends who are founders of brands who built out this game plan of how they were going to get to an exit based off of revenue numbers and profitability and raising capital. And they got to a point in the business where they raised so much capital to get revenue to a certain point where they had such little equity left in the way that the deals were structured that if they didn't hit certain revenue marks and continue growing, they actually wouldn't make any money on an exit. That's a really scary and dangerous spot to be. I don't want to be there.
Yeah, those earnouts it can make it seem like, oh, they're valuing us at a, $150 million company, but it's like, wait, that valuation was only validated if in the 3-year horizon you grow 30% year over year, 3 straight years, and clear a bottom line minimum. You know what I mean? So it's like, no, they're saying you might be a $150 million company. If you. So I've heard plenty of horror stories on that. It's like you got to get some of that money up front. But that's, wow, man, to be where you're at, 80 million top line and be, clearing 10 plus EBITDA is phenomenal. And that would make you, as far as desirable from PE firms, like if you entered a process right now, maybe not right now, because I think the deal market kind of sucks still, man, you would get a ton of interest, and that's awesome. And we're kind of looking at it in a similar way. I think we're trying to maybe in the next year or two take a few chips off the table. And this is just more kind of on the personal side. I've spoken to some founders who have done processes and been through it. And one of the kind of justifications, one of the guys who I talked to told me when he was kind of on the fence, hey, whether we do this or not, is they took a deal and then he did another deal 5 years later, which is kind of the horizon. As you probably know, the PE guys want to cash out, and then hopefully you get an even bigger deal, on the second bite at the apple. But he said what that allowed him to do on a personal level with his family and secure the finances was worth, not waiting 5 more years. He's like that, he's like, we're living in the moment. So like, if this allows me to upgrade my family and lock down their 529 accounts and all these other things and kind of check those boxes, it's worth it to kind of do it early rather than wait for like the ultimate bite at the apple, like 5 years later, because you're always going to be kind of chasing that target. But man, if you guys are at 80 million and where you're at on EBITDA, that is absolutely phenomenal. Particularly given how competitive the space is, how much more expensive it is become to acquire customers on the paid channel. Like I'm sure iOS 14 when that hit, and was that May of 2022? 22. Obviously that threw a wrinkle in everyone's paid strategies on that front, and supply chain headwinds, during COVID, now we got to order an 8-month supply when, because the lead times, and these are all things I'm assuming you had to navigate, as did we. But to be with the dust settled, to be where you're at, that is just phenomenal, man. Congratulations.
No, thank you. Yeah. I think the ideal scenario for most founders is 2 bites of the apple, right? Yeah. Where you bring on, say, PE, and you do either a minority or a majority sale. And then down the road, a few years later, you either sell to larger PE or strategic. And the way that I always thought about it is, for that first partner you bring on, I would rather choose the right partner over the right valuation. And then when you go for the second bite of the apple, that's when you go for the right valuation, because you got to work with that partner for a few years and you're going to be married.
Yes. No, that's a great way to do it. And if you enter a process, that will likely be probably not going with the highest bidder. But I think let's just, for fun, let's break down, for you on a personal level, maybe you've already done this on a napkin, but all right, let's say 15 million EBITDA, and we'll do a low multiple for you right now. We'll do a 10x multiple. So that puts you at $150 million enterprise business, which I think you could easily make the argument you're 200 million plus. We'll do 150 for easy math. If you want to sell 49%, do the math on that. That's 75 million bucks in equity. And then they're likely going to want to raise debt on top of it. So if we do a conservative debt package would be 2 times your EBITDA, that's a $30 million debt package, right? You could probably do up to 3x, but we'll do 2 just to be safe. So that's 75 million in equity. If they raise 30 million in debt and you get half of, and that would half go to you if that's how you're doing it. You're looking at, you're creeping up to 100 million bucks in your pocket, dude. So just keep that in mind for the family.
Do you guys have a PE partner on board?
We have an investment bank that was because we were in a process before. It was in literally the worst possible timing you could ever imagine. We had a valuation at 100 million as an enterprise, and we actually went with one that put us at 88.5 at the time, because we same thing that you said. We thought they would be better partners to get us to the next bite at the apple. They weren't so traditional PE where the other company was like, you know exactly what you're getting. It's going to be very transactional. You got the Harvard MBAs down your ass, all these other things. So we were in a process. We signed an LOI. And then on like day 50 of the 60-day LOI period, due diligence period, the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, right? So the debt package immediately fell off, and then half of the equity fell off as well, because part of the equity partners got nervous of like, hey, we got to wait to see how things shake out. So it was literally like in a 10-year horizon, I finally was like, you know what? Let's take some chips off the table for the family, and that's. Like, you couldn't have threaded the needle worse, and it's almost comical now, because like, what are you even going to do? So we ended up scrapping the process, and I think it's honestly for the better, because we're such a better business now, and we've been able to diversify. And I was able to kind of reverse engineer what this next outcome will be, because I now know what they look at. Right? They want to make sure your supply chain's diversified your sales channels. They're looking at, where's the risk in this organization for me to lose my money, and if you can mitigate those risk factors and get ahead of it. When we go into these management presentations next time, I'm going to be able to speak to all of it, because I'm like, yeah, guys, I already know the answers to the test. I know exactly what you're about to ask me, and I got a good answer for you. So maybe a blessing in disguise. Obviously, we still need to make the deal, but I did the whole process, and it all played out. So I just wanted to have a little fun with your scenario, so you realize kind of what you're sitting on, and that's just freaking awesome, man. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah, based off the way you're calculating that, I was like, all right, you've either gone through a process or you have a private equity partner, because you know this game and you got the experience in the space.
Well, I mess around with it just when I'm bored, drinking a coffee, on what that would look like for us. You know what I mean? Based on what our EBITDA is and what we think the multiple would be. And if you do 49%, or if you did 30%, and like what the debt package would look like if we do a 3x of EBITDA for debt, and all these other things, then you kind of just throw it into a calculator and you're like, oh, that'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. One of the things we say here all the time is, especially since experiencing a process 2 years ago, is that we're not going to build the business to sell. We're going to build the business like we're going to own it forever, but we're going to be opportunistic. Because in the past, this mistake we made when we ran a process before is we started making decisions that were guided for the process to sell. And it just set us up in the wrong way in all ways possible. So now we're going to build it like we're going to own it forever until an opportunity presents itself.
Yeah, it's really wise, because, and you said it earlier, you can't. What focus does for an organization, and I mean true focus, when everybody's rowing in the same direction, it's clear what the intent is, it's clear what the execution does, and then, like you just said, that little subtle kind of voice that comes in when you're starting to it's not that you're doing a complete shift in focus, but you start to prioritize things that are to achieve an outcome versus what's actually best for the long term of the organization. It's subtle, but then you get through 6 years, a month of making those micro decisions and realize, like, shit, we lost our focus. It didn't happen in one day. It didn't happen in a month, but you made 100 decisions that kind of just slightly took you off course. And then you realize, okay, we've got to lock it back in. Of course, unless the goal is just a purely a financial outcome, which in that case you can, if you know you're sliding all your chips in, it can look a little different then.
Well, it's great advice, because we did that exact thing, man. At the time, the top line revenue was more important than bottom line, right? And we know once we're kind of in that process, that trailing 12 EBITDA, number, every month it gets updated, right? And we were holding on to that number for dear life, trying to make it. But this was at the exact time the consumer sentiment was starting to get really bad, right? The economy was going, inflation, interest rates, et cetera. So we were fighting that. And how do we fight it? Well, discounts. Well, shoot, let's do another leggings flash sale. We know that's $1 million, so that'll add to our monthly top line. So we were chasing that quick, gratification. But over time, when you're doing a flash sale every month, and then every quarter you're doing a site wide, and then you're doing your clearance vault sale, you become like a discount brand, and it made top line look good, but then your gross margin goes way down. And even our trailing 12 EBITDA was starting to go down. And we were just like, just get through to the finish line and then we'll figure it out. So that's such good advice. You have to stick to your guns and say, hey, this is our business. We are as advertised. We're not changing how we are just to ink a deal to then go right back to it. And that's how we've been this way around. And we kind of had to rip the Band-Aid off on the discounting and say, okay, we need to recalibrate the customer. We need to be a high value premium brand. And if we're doing flash sales all the time, it's gonna give the perception that we have to discount our stuff to sell it. So I think that is just phenomenal advice. And don't be chasing that. Even once you get into an LOI, just stick to your guns. Although it can be easy to be like, well, let's sneak one more flash sale there and do $1 million in 3 days. It's like, no. There's long-term ramifications to that. So yeah, man, well put. I feel like you're finishing my sentences, honestly, man.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot recently has just been all around the thought and idea of opportunity. Or when you first start a business, and this is probably so applicable to early entrepreneurs, is that you don't have a lot of opportunity. Like opportunities aren't arriving in your email inbox daily. So of the few opportunities you get, you take advantage of all of them. Any opportunity to talk to someone new or meet with a founder or go get a coffee with someone or just anything. And as you're growing your business, you're growing experience over years and years and years, the opportunities become abundant. I mean, there's like opportunities daily to do collaborations with other brands and partner with new athletes or ambassadors and do merch or accessories of all these different types. But you have to become so focused the longer you're in business and the bigger you become, where now for me to say yes to an opportunity has to be like a hard yes. And I say no to so many things. I mean, like even and my team has to keep me on track sometimes. Like earlier this week, a brand reached out to do a collab, and it was like a dream brand that we would always want to do a collab with. And I brought it up to the leadership team, and we had to put it through the vision test. Like, does it align with our core values, our purpose, and our goals? And it didn't. So we said no to this opportunity, which 2-3 years ago, I would have said yes on the spot. I wanted to have asked for any advice or feedback from anyone else. I would have signed the contract right there and then. But now where we're at, if it doesn't align with that vision, we have to say no. And it's not personal, but it's just like the right decision and move to make to stay so focused. Because if we're not focused and it's not clear to us what we're focused on, the consumer, whether new or existing, the brand is going to feel unfocused. And that's the last thing I want.
So powerful. And it's something, I mean, we've went through several iterations of, I call it the shiny object syndrome. It's so, but it scales, as you said. It's not as if we're making silly decisions year after year. It's that those decisions become more and more enticing, but the more, as we've touched on several times, you stay focused. It's like both on, and that's a personal and as a business, like, you know this better even than I do, Bear. It's like my meter for response to people, because I know you wrestle with it, and Nick, I'm sure you do too, is like, if I wouldn't communicate the way that person was, it's an automatic no for me. Meaning, like, can I book a meeting with you? Can we go get lunch? Can we get a coffee? It's like, if I wouldn't have just randomly reached out to somebody, like if I wouldn't do that, I don't even feel the need to respond. Because if you don't have those hard boundaries for yourself, you end up just flooded with just, you look at your day and you're like, 85% of my day is doing shit that had absolutely no tangible impact, both on my personal life or others. And that's just, that's a terrible spot to be as an individual and as an organization. If you have leaders that are operating that way, it's not good for anyone.
Are you guys familiar with Cal Newport's work? Like his book, Deep Work, for example?
No.
I highly recommend Cal Newport's books. Like Deep Work is a really good example of his books. But it's all about just eliminating distractions to be able to stay focused. You know, if I pull up my phone in front of someone and they see my unread text messages on my little green box, they lose their mind. But for me, it's nothing personal of not responding to people. But it's just that if I'm just on my phone responding all day, I'm not working on anything else. And I have to eliminate distractions by creating boundaries. And if I then do that, I can focus on things that actually help other people and myself achieve what I'm trying to achieve. But I can't be responding all day to everything and everyone.
So good. And particularly if you're kind of like a people pleaser, if that's in your personality at all, which I think I fall into that, you end up feeling the obligation to get back to people. And then what ends up happening is you do it at 9 o'clock at night when your daughter's asleep. And then hey man, I'm really sorry for the delay. I know it's been a few days. And I'm spending 45 minutes of my time, like, apologizing to people that I owe no apologies to, because like, it's, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Would you reach out to the CEO of another company? So that's like that gauge.
I have enough awareness. Like if I hit Nick up and he didn't respond, or like if I text Evan from Black Rifle and he doesn't respond, I know it because I'm in the other seat. So like I don't take offense to it at all, because I know exactly how it goes. So I feel like I have the perspective, but I think a lot of people maybe don't have that perspective. So then I feel obligated to respond to them. But I had to rip the Band-Aid off, because I realized, okay, this is just death by 1,000 cuts. And it's really only affecting me at the end. Like if I don't respond to that one text message, that guy's not going to be like, he's not going to be upset and, get depressed. But if I keep responding to these in perpetuity, like I'm going to lose my fucking mind, So I particularly on social media, that's like another one. If you have a public profile, it's like everyone just thinks like they can dump all this shit on you. It's like, guys, I'm not. So I think that's a great lesson learned for the early entrepreneurs, is that journey. And in the very beginning, as Nick, you said, you take every call, you take every opportunity, because you have to, right? And you explore, turn over every stone, and then you get to a critical mass and it completely flips. But for me, I experienced it in that transition point. I didn't realize I needed to transition, right? So I still took, I'll book that 30-minute call before you know it, your whole day is booked and you get nothing done strategically that actually matters for the business. And then it comes to the point you realize, okay, I have to totally restructure this. So I think you articulated that progression and that journey so well for any founder that is going through that process. And once again, great advice, man.
A question for you guys. Now I get this question a lot from other founders and early entrepreneurs. Like, where do you get a lot of your personal and professional growth information? Do you read books? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you have a mentor? Are you part of these cohorts of other founders or like masterminds? Like, what do you guys personally do?
I think I could be a lot better on all of this. I always say I'm going to read books, and I buy the hardback because I want to read like a paper book. I'm not going to do it in a Kindle, and then they sit on my shelf. And that's something I'm like actively working of carving out. And that's where I talk about setting boundaries. Hopefully we'll free up time to actually be kind of focused work. For me, I think my biggest pro dev is podcasts. Like for me, I nerd out on like e-commerce tactics. So I typically will listen to ones about like that, as dorky as that is, just because I like to kind of be at the front edge of just, if it's about like an email remarketing technique, or you're building your SMS list and what's changing on the paid landscape. Like I just love the game. And then, founders podcasts about, bigger stuff like this, building a brand and just, zooming out. And then last is just kind of staying up on current events. Like, listen to the Wall Street Journal podcast every morning, because I want to know, okay, with the tariffs, what does this look like? And, just bigger stuff as the CEO. I think we should just be savvy on and kind of know what the environment is around our business. But I think I could be a lot better. I get invited to a lot of those founders like summits or the founders clubs where you pay, $20,000 a year and you get exclusive access, and they do a cool retreat. And I've never done one of those, but I have heard there's an argument to be made for investing in your own professional development as a CEO, even though it feels expensive. If it builds 3 important relationships that allow you to like grow your business because they're all, founders on the same level, that there could be incredible value to that. I just haven't quite made that leap yet of like paying someone $30,000 to be a part of some exclusive club where we can all, talk about how cool we are, at in San Diego for a weekend or something. You know what I mean? But curious, Tony, I know you're more studied than I am. Despite the Yale helmet behind me, but
mine's West Virginia.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you flipped the script on me. Yeah.
It's a mix of both on my end. I would say podcasts like Diary of a CEO, Stephen Bartlett, who I'm sure you've heard of, Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson, Founders Podcast that you already touched on. Avid listener of those, and then reading, I'm a mix. I have 3 daughters under 3 right now, so I typically have like 20 minutes to read before I go to sleep, which in that case, I actually like something that's fiction. But even there, I like, have you ever heard of the Red Rising series, Nick?
Oh God, here we go.
Please, you read the Red Rising series. It's a 6-book series, and it's a fiction book, but even just on the leadership and human dynamics, it's my favorite. I've read the whole series 5 times, which is just insane because they're all 600-page books. But yeah, reading's a huge one for me. But when it comes to more business, I would say I love hearing people's stories, which is, it sounds like why you like the Founders podcast as well. And then, yeah, Stephen Bartlett. And then of course off there, I always find I end up down a rabbit hole when I really like a guest. And if they have their own podcast, I'll end up listening to them. So if I look over the last 15 years, I mean, podcasts it's insane the amount of podcast time I've spent listening to. And it's just, yeah, I'm sure you're the same. Driving, exercising, just having something in there that helps develop. And a lot of that for me, I'm the opposite of Bear. The tactics, I'm so in that every day that like that's like brushing my teeth as far as the e-com tactics, because that's what I'm doing every day. I love to hear the broad, zoomed out kind of leadership styles, personalities, different like how they're shaping kind of the culture of the business, both from like their individual kind of development, but then also how to empower team members, how to delegate. There's so much art and so many different tactics within that I find that extremely fascinating to hear seasoned people talk through those types of things.
Yeah, I relate to that, where for me, the books or podcasts I listen to, I enjoy the art over the science.
Exactly.
So like I run every morning, and that's when I listen to audiobooks or podcasts. So an hour every morning, I'm typically listening to an audiobook. And I truly believe that like I started listening to audiobooks and reading books consistently in 2020 when I first started training for an Ironman, and I was spending hours on the bike. So I just started listening to audiobooks. That has transformed my journey as an entrepreneur and a leader for sure. This has been really powerful for me. And then we have one advisor in the business. His name's Chris Hickey, who has a lot of experience in this space, in the industry, who we talk to daily. And he has been instrumental for the business, but me specifically, personally and professionally. But I've had to go through trial and error. You know, I've tried these cohort groups of founders coming together. I haven't had much success in those because it's such a varying degree of experience, where one day someone might be asking this high level art focused leadership question and no one can really engage. And the next day someone's asking like a day one, you know, how do you draft an NDA type question? And it was really hard to filter, you know, what was applicable and what wasn't applicable. And then I've had other advisors in the business who just weren't helpful. You know, they'd be like, go read this article or go read this book. So it's been trial and error, but mine personally comes from a combination of podcast, audiobooks, and then one key advisor.
And Nick, do you find something Bear's heard me talk about, and there's books written on it, and I will honestly say I didn't land on this from reading a book. It was more, I did this almost naturally or instinctively, and then I read a book that kind of connected the dots for me, is that I have a strange, like I'm not somebody who says, I'm a businessman, I'm going to make sure all of the media I'm consuming is tailored to this, because I've found extreme value. Now, I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because I do, as I just said, I do listen to a lot of business podcasts, read a lot of books. But then what I've found, and it relates to kind of the fiction series I recommended to you, is that actually being willing to stay super passionate about things that are completely outside of business and like leadership, I can actually connect dots between things that others don't even have, because they almost get too hyper focused. And actually, I'll remove other people. But the question for me is, do you have things too that are maybe even outside of fitness and business that you allow yourself to still just like have fun with and kind of stay engaged, because it's a natural kind of attraction that you have? And then have you seen your ability that like, oh, even though these seemingly on paper seem completely disconnected, I'm actually able to connect dots here that makes me a better leader, makes me a better businessman?
For sure. There's like 3 things top of mind right now. One, I'm building out a ranch right now. It's a 240 acre ranch here in Central Texas. It's 20 minutes from my house. which has been a dream project of mine for a long time, which I'm having so much fun with, but it's also really closely tied to the business. So we'll be able to use it for, like, we're hosting an ultra marathon next month on the ranch. So we'll host it for athlete retreats and races, events, but I'm having fun with it just in terms of like learning how to build a barn. Like, we're building a barn on that property right now, and we're clearing land and burning brush and putting up fences and putting up deer feeders and blinds and all of the things. I'm having a lot of fun with that. Outside of that, I'm a big foodie. Like, I love trying different restaurants and different cuisines in the Austin area specifically, or whenever we travel. But what I love about going out to dinner is not just the food, but it's the hospitality. So two of my favorite books, actually, one is called Setting the Table by Danny Meyer, and it's all about service and the hospitality industry. And another one is called Unreasonable Hospitality, which I'm reading right now. Again, all about the hospitality business within restaurants, but is so applicable to any type of brand building and creating an experience for your customer that builds loyalty, retention, and return. But I mean, I love cooking. I love barbecuing. If you open up my Instagram Explore page right now, it's probably ranches, food, and barbecue, specifically here in Texas. And then I've been looking for like an old 1970 time frame Ford truck. And I just actually found one at this dealership out near Kyle, Texas. And it's a 1974 Ford F-250 Highboy crew cab. So like, that's been like a passion project of mine for a few months now. I was trying to find this truck, but I always tie it back into the business in some way where, like, whenever I'm buying a product or supporting a company or a brand or another founder, if I can connect in a different way and there's this experience and you're treated really well, and it makes you want to tell everyone about this brand or this product, it's like, why that consumer behavior is so interesting to me. It's like, why am I so passionate about this product or this style, this year truck, or this restaurant? Like, what's making me tell everyone about it and want to go back to it? And how do I take those lessons and apply that to my business?
Yeah, I love that.
That's so good. I always find myself in those places. I'm always like looking at how could I build efficiencies at these businesses? You know, if I'm at some like fast food and it's not efficient, you're like, oh man, if they could just add one more checkout in here. So I try to turn that brain off, occasionally, but it's still there. But well, Nick, man, I know that, we're recording this on a Monday, and if your schedule looks anything like ours on a typical Monday, I know it's very valuable real estate we just took. So thank you so much for sharing some of that. I feel like we didn't even scrape the surface, but so many good lessons learned. And wow, I mean, the similarities with your journey and us here at Born Primitive is just insane. I just want to give you props, man. I think very few people realize where, in the percentile you are in based on what you've been able to build, starting off with basically a line of credit with USA. Like, that's completely insane. Your outcome, even though it's still yet to be determined, is a 0.0001% outcome, because guess what? The supplement brands that you compete against have raised tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in capital, which allowed them to do all the sexy marketing and sponsor all the athletes and do the giant booth at the Arnold that's 80 by 80 that cost them $200,000 and all these things. Man, to hear you and where you're at with it is so freaking impressive, and it is so hard to do. That is such an outlier outcome. So I just want to give you credit. I think as founders, if you're anything like me, you have the inability to kind of sit back and admire your handiwork, because it's always on to the next thing, right? Mm-hmm. As soon as you hit a little milestone, okay, celebrate for 24, if that, and you're right on either solving the next problem or moving the goalpost even further away, and then you're laser focused on getting there. So I just wanted to kind of allow you the opportunity to reflect on your handiwork, and really put in perspective what you've accomplished. And the last thing I'll say on the professional development front, is something that I've done recently is I've linked up with other founders. And it started with there's a brand called the Normal brand. They got a great clothing brand. They're out of St. Louis, and great dudes. They were college football players. We were college football players. We hit it off. They were 31. We were 31. There were too many similarities. And I said, well, hey, I know we're both in clothing, but let's get on a monthly, we call it the brothers call. And let's just all come with a couple quick key learnings, a little bit more on the tactical side. A couple calls ago, I was talking about like our exclusions on our paid social media channel, and that they implemented that in their account like the next day, and it like changed their paid account overnight because it's something we learned the hard way. So I try to come into those calls with, okay, hey, let's share some really significant shit that you've found, on your side, and bring it to the table in a practical way. And we're all busy, so let's get the hell out of here in 45 minutes. And then, for example, they've opened 10 retail stores, and we're opening up our first down the road here in August. So they're helping me now on that front, because they're like, oh, dude, we're way ahead of you. Like, we made all these mistakes. So like, just, let's get on a call and we'll walk you through that. So I think there's tremendous value in that. I know. So if that's something, you'd ever want to, sink 30 minutes once a month and just get right to business. I don't think it needs to be some formal, founders society where you got to pay 50 grand. So just, you hopefully have my info. If not, we'll get it to you. If that's something you want me to include you in the one we're doing, or if you'd want to have one-on-one and just share learnings, we're solving a lot of the same problems. And I think it just creates a lot of efficiencies, because maybe a problem I just solved, you're about to go into that, that COA analysis of what you're going to do, and vice versa. And that's a quick way to kind of get ahead of the game and ahead of the curve. So I just offer that up, but man, what a privilege it was to have this conversation, and I hope you guys can keep rocking and rolling. And shit, tariffs just came in, so it's like every time you think you get it figured out, there's a new variable, and you got to throw your hands up. And I was just telling the team that this morning at our morning stand-up meeting. Hey, does this present some challenges? Of course. Does it potentially hurt our margin? And of course, just to make us consider some pricing. Of course it does, but the mentality does not change, and we adapt to whatever environment we're given, and someone has to survive, right? You know what I mean? You got to be like the freaking ragweed, man. They can't kill you. And that's what we've done and what you guys have done. So really appreciate it, man.
No, thank you guys. Appreciate all the kind words, and respect goes both ways. So I appreciate the time today and what you guys are building, what you have built, and where you're headed. So thank you.
Right on, brother. Well, thanks again. Hope you have a good Monday, and definitely stay in touch.
I will. Thanks, guys.